This morning, Nigel Farage recorded what he called an emergency address to the nation. He stood in front of the camera, branded it as an official Reform UK Limited communication, and delivered 14 minutes of content. I've watched it twice, and I want to walk you through exactly what he did, because the structure of this matters as much as the words. Henry Novak was 18 years old, a finance student at the University of Southampton. On the 3rd of December last year, he was walking home from a night out with his football teammates when he was stabbed 5 times by a man named Vikram Digwa. When police arrived, Digwa told them that Henry had racially abused him and knocked off his turban. The officers believed it. They handcuffed Henry, a dying teenager lying on the pavement, stabbed 5 times, saying over and over he couldn't breathe, and then they arrested him. Henry died in handcuffs. He died before anyone believed him. This week, the body cam footage was released. A jury found Digwa guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life with a minimum of 21 years, and Henry's father, Mark, stood outside Southampton Crown Court and spoke.
Henry was 18 years old. He was kind, ambitious, loved and full of promise. He had his whole life ahead of him, a degree to finish, places to see and a future to build. That future was stolen from him, and no verdict or sentence will ever give it back. The police were told by our son himself and by a member of the public who called 999 that they heard someone shout that they had been stabbed. But the police did not believe them. Let me be absolutely clear. We hold Vikram Digwa solely and 100% responsible for the brutal murder of our son. But Henry should not have died on the streets of Southampton in police custody. The way he was treated was inhumane and degrading. This is not a case about Sikhism. This is not a case about racism. This is a case about murder.
That family, in the worst moment of their lives, were specific, dignified, and clear. They know exactly who is responsible for their son's death. They know exactly what they want to come from it. And they said directly, on the record, we do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, or tension. So what did Nigel Farage decide to do today?
It's a moment to take a long, hard look at ourselves as a country and what we've become. The murder of 18-year-old student Henry Novak was bad enough of itself, but compounded in the most extraordinary way by the behaviour of the police officers. Just think of it, an 18-year-old lad, a student, been out with some friends for the evening, on the way home, and victim of a sustained attack, stabbed several times, chased down the street, stabbed seriously 5 times. And what happens? Well, the assailant's brother rings the police to say, we've just been racially attacked and abused by a white guy. The sirens blare, they arrive. Young Henry must have thought that at last help was at hand, but far, far from it. The police act from the beginning to the end, and the end when he dies, lying on a pavement, having been stabbed in handcuffs. The last thing he heard on this earth was him being read his rights by the police. He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words?
He opened up with Henry. Of course he did. He described the stabbing, the footage, the handcuffs. He called it a moment to take a long, hard look at ourselves as a country. So far, so reasonable. Henry's death is genuinely horrifying. The police failure is real, and the anger is legitimate. But Farage's speech doesn't stay on Henry. Within about 90 seconds, he's moved to George Floyd. He reminds you that Floyd said, I can't breathe. He reminds you that Starmer took the knee. He reminds you that Churchill's statue being defaced, and then he asks why the reaction to Henry's death has been silenced.
Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances in Midwest America a few years ago. Remember the reaction to that and the way the police behaved. Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter. It's exploded all over the country.
Now, that pivot is doing enormous political work, and it is worth slowing down on. George Floyd was killed by a police officer kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. Henry Nowak was killed by a civilian attacker. The only thing these two cases share is the phrase, "I can't breathe." And Farage is using that phrase as a bridge between two events that aren't structurally comparable. Floyd's case was about state violence. Henry's case is about police incompetence and a killer's lie. Both are serious, but they are not the same story. That comparison is the foundation for everything that follows.
Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities. We've brought in hate speech laws. We've brought in a DEI agenda. We've brought in what is called positive discrimination in favour of ethnic minorities over those of white people whose families have lived in Britain in many cases for centuries.
Two-tier policing becomes two-tier Britain. Two-tier Britain becomes mass immigration. Mass immigration becomes cultural unrecognisability. Cultural unrecognisability becomes hate speech laws, and hate speech laws become DEI. DEI becomes positive discrimination. Positive discrimination becomes
anti-white prejudice.
The entire evidential basis for this chain of argument is an anonymous email, forwarded by Alison Pearson of the Daily Telegraph, from an unnamed Hampshire police officer. That's it. One unverified claim that police promotions are decided on racial and religious grounds rather than merit, stated in a national broadcast address as if it were fact. He also claims that Digwe's sentence was below the recommended minimum and he'll be writing to the Attorney General. The court record shows a life sentence with 21-year minimum. The judge noted that Digwe had no prior criminal record and had not gone out on the night intending to kill. You can disagree with the sentence, but calling it a product of racial politics on the basis of a claim that you haven't verified is a long way from evidence. The destination of his speech is what matters, though.
Henry's family have responded to this in just the most extraordinarily dignified way. But I suggest the rest of us respond to this with pure, cold rage. Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives. An end to DEI.
Cold rage. That's what he's calling for from a sitting MP on his party's official channel in a country where less than 2 years ago riots tore through our towns. Riots fueled by misinformation about a murderer's identity. Riots that left over 360 police officers injured, mosques attacked, asylum seekers' hotels set alight, and a poll that found that 51% of the British public believe Farage bore responsibility for what happened that summer. They even dubbed them the Farage riots. He knows what cold rage does. He watched it happen and helped it along.
And over the course of my tenure as Home Secretary, to say all are equal before the law and the police must always act without fear and without favour towards any one group. I don't think it's helpful for us to start pitting either majority or different minority communities against one another. That is not what this moment requires. And it is important. He's right, there's always a balance to be struck. There mustn't be underreaction or indeed overreaction. It is always a balance. And I do believe that the police in the vast majority of cases do get that balance right. And as I say, our police officers every single day run towards danger in order to keep us safe. I will always scrutinise all these actions to make sure that our police service is functioning as it should be, so that every single citizen in our country, regardless of the colour of their skin or the faith that they have or may not have, can be absolutely certain that they will always be treated equally and that whatever complaint they have will always be investigated in the way that we would all expect.
That was the Home Secretary at the dispatch box today, not pitting communities against one another, not what this moment requires. Farage spent 14 minutes doing exactly that. Here's what makes this different, though, from ordinary political opportunism. Ordinary opportunism would be something bad happened, the government responded poorly, vote for us. You know, it's cynical, but within the normal rules. What Farage is doing is something else. He's taking a real tragedy, a real policing failure and a family's grief, and using it as an open move in a speech that ends somewhere it's always going to end. Henry Nowak wasn't the point of the speech. Henry was the permission slip for the speech. The destination was mapped out way before he started. Immigration, DEI, white victimhood, cold rage. Henry is the vessel that carries the audience there. But here's the thing. Henry's own father told us clearly what this case is and isn't about. Standing outside the court, he said his family holds Digwear solely and 100% responsible for his son's death. He's not talking about DEI or the immigration or two-tier policing culture. Just one man, 100%. He said he does not want Henry's death to be used to create division, hatred or tension. He said, and the prosecution agreed, this is not a case about Sikhism. It's not a case about racism. It's a case about murder.
We want to use Henry's heartbreaking story to make change for the better. We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to make our streets safer for everyone.
Nigel Farage watched the same footage as that family. He heard the same verdict and he made a very different choice about what to do with it.
I think Nigel Farage's reaction is the wrong reaction. And I start my answer to your question through the eyes of the family. They have said they do not want this whipped up. They have been through the most extraordinary, awful experience. They don't want this whipped up. And Nigel Farage is completely wrong to use this to try and create division. He would be wrong in any circumstances. But when Henry's family are saying, please don't do that, it's our son, then really, as politicians, as human beings, we should start where they start. And that's where I start.
Now, if you do like this kind of breakdown, be sure to hit that like button. Maybe support the channel with the memberships as well. The IOPC investigation is ongoing and Henry's family are still fighting for that full, fearless and transparent inquiry. And that is the story that's worth following. Not Farage's emergency dress, which ended this morning. The only emergency in it was the one that he is trying to create.